there are these two sort of moral methods out there that I think are predominant in our society. And Catholic social teaching has, in my reading, been moving toward transcending the limits of these approaches, but it still has some significant room for growth. So in order to contribute to that growth and impact U.S. policy, I draw on Jesus, Gandhi, Ghaffar Khan, who was a Muslim peacemaker, Martin Luther King, in order to elaborate this kind of virtue-based approach with the corresponding set of core practices, which will be discussed shortly. But I also put this in conversation with human rights discourse as a sort of recognition of the steps that are needed to participate and have an impact on U.S. policy. So let me give you a little bit of just some pieces of my narrative to share with you how my social context has helped me to arise at this place. So I have, as probably many have, experienced various types of conflict in my life, out of which my passion for peacemaking arose. Sort of somewhat common things these days, from divorce to parents struggling with alcoholism, unexpected deaths of loved ones, and those sort of things which have the possibility of opening up our imagination about life. Also experiences with the poor in Haiti. I was there for 5 months after my undergrad, and that really, woke me up to questions of social justice and poverty. My first teaching opportunity at a high school was shaped by 9/11. It was the first day of class. I was in the classroom when the event happened, and the subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were core moments in my movement toward offering this book. So, the Catholic context. I am a practicing Catholic with a love for Jesus that has continued to orient my life since primarily my undergraduate days. And what I have found in the Catholic context that is particularly relevant here is in Vatican II, one of the key shifts was this shift to a call to holiness for all Catholics and all people, generally speaking. Before this, the call to holiness was primarily for clergy or for perhaps some in the religious orders. But this was a new challenge to folks to become the best we can be, to develop the virtues, to live as Jesus lived in full. There are also other shifts towards interreligious dialogue, towards human dignity and human rights, and returning to the value of Scripture and the role model of Jesus. But most U.S. Catholic leadership, in my opinion, has not adequately challenged U.S. political and military leadership on A, the preparation for war. We are by far the largest spender and seller of arms in the world. And B, on the use of war. Things like the atomic bomb, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Yet, documents of Catholic social teaching have been strengthening the presumption against war and recognizing the increasing importance of nonviolence for public policy. And I'll give you some examples of those documents shortly. Now, turning to sort of the broader U.S. context, we have this book originally came out when Obama had been, just after he'd kind of been elected. He was working for change. We've had some positive things from movements on green energy and immigration and healthcare. But there continue to be some big challenges. We are still an economic power, but we continue to struggle in a lot of ways. The strain with other countries is still pretty obvious, particularly with Muslims, as we've seen in some of the recent videos and the Libya ambassador situation. One of the pieces that also contributes to this strain with other countries, I think, is our habits of militarism. We've mentioned the spending. We have military bases spread around the world. Some have counted up to 700 or so. Our recent wars, Guantanamo Bay, the use of torture, etc. Yet there is a a particularly positive sign in the Department of State. There is this new bureau called the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization, and they have a program called the Civilian Response Corps, which is a group of civilian experts which are sent into conflict zones to try to prevent or diffuse conflict. And it's new, so there's a lot of room for growth, but I'll come back to this a little bit more in the paper. So we have the drone bombing, of course. We have Libya and Syria still happening. In our political rhetoric coming up to the elections, the questions on military spending are generally one person wants to sort of slow the growth of military spending, the other wants to either maintain it or increase it in some areas. And then the folks in the political running for president who talk about significant cuts in military spending are pretty much not in the debates and very much out of the mainstream. So this is just another kind of reflection, I think, of the presence of militarism in our country. So some other pieces of this context is that violence shows up often in children's toys, right? Particularly if you have a boy and you want to get a lunchbox or a Halloween costume. Almost everything you see is some form of a hero who uses violence in some particularly in a way that's considered justified. Globally, we are the most heavily armed society. We have the highest rate of civilian guns at 90 guns per 100 people. The closest country to us is Yemen at 60 guns per 100 people. The U.S. has the largest incarceration rate in the world. So these realities have arisen in a U.S. society which primarily thinks of nonviolence as a rule or a strategy. So this is kind of some of the significance as to why I'm trying to think beyond these moral approaches. So my argument is that a virtue-based assessment of nonviolent peacemaking, enhanced by aspects of human rights, will largely resolve some of these limits found in these two rule-based and strategic-based approaches.